Mark Ruffalo just went to Washington to help stop a Hollywood merger. Not a movie, not a Marvel press tour, not another celebrity lecture about saving democracy while flying private. No, Bruce Banner himself dialed into a Senate hearing to say this Paramount Warner Bros. Deal is a disaster. At the same time, thousands of Hollywood signatories signed an open letter against it. The theater owners are warning it would hurt the business. Proxy advisors are telling shareholders, sure, maybe take the deal, but don't you dare reward David Zaslav with an $886 million golden parachute. And in 3 days, Warner Bros. Discovery shareholders, they vote. So today, we're not doing vibes. We're not doing anonymous insiders say. We are doing what this channel does best. We are stacking the receipts on a $111 billion Hollywood power grab that keeps getting uglier the closer it gets to the finish line. Roll that intro. Welcome back to The Critical Nerd. If you're new here, this channel is where we break down Hollywood, media, box office, and corporate chaos without the studio spin. And if you've been here before, you already know the rule. Keep your expectations low and your receipts high. So if you're into the box office autopsy, studio meltdowns, merger chaos, and billionaires doing billionaire things, do me a favor, because YouTube loves this stuff. Hit like, subscribe, share this video out there with your friends and family, and let's get into it. Because the Paramount WBD merger is no longer just some abstract Wall Street headline. This is now a live countdown story. The vote is Thursday, April 23rd, and the closer we get, the worse the optics get. Let's start with the hard basics. Warner Bros. Discovery shareholders are being asked to vote on a merger with Paramount Skydance. The headline number is about $111 billion. The offer is at $31 per share in cash. That's the hook. That's the bait. That is the part designed to make shareholders sit up and say, you know what? Maybe I can live with this circus. Because on paper, this is being sold as scale. Bigger library, bigger studio footprint, bigger streaming footprint, bigger distribution, bigger leverage, bigger everything. Paramount already controls Paramount Pictures, CBS, Nickelodeon, MTV, and the rest of that empire. Warner Bros. Discovery brings in Warner Bros., HBO, DC, CNN, Discovery, TNT, TBS, HGTV, basically half your cable package and a huge chunk of your modern movie and TV history. Put that together, and you do not get a healthy creative ecosystem. You get a mega company with even more control over what gets made, what gets shelved, what gets licensed, what gets buried, and what gets blamed on the audience later. That's the first real point here. This is not being pitched as a creative renaissance. It's being pitched as a consolidation. And Hollywood keeps pretending consolidation is salvation right up until the layoffs hit. Now here's where the story gets extra greasy. Even people who are fine with the merger are choking on the David Zaslav payout. And that matters because it is one thing for critics, creators, and angry fans to hate a deal. I mean, I talk about stuff all the time that, I don't necessarily like, and so do other creators in this space. But it's another thing entirely when the corporate governance people, the boring suit and tie types whose whole job is to look at compensation packages and board behavior, and they start saying, this is ridiculous. ISS recommended that shareholders support the merger but vote against Zaslav's compensation package. That is an important distinction. They're not saying reject the deal. They're saying take the money if you want, but this golden parachute is obscene. And obscene is a pretty good word for it. Because David Zaslav could walk away with roughly $886 million. Let that sit there for a second. $886 million. For a guy whose tenure at WBD has been defined by debt, write-offs, cancellations, creative chaos, brand damage, and shareholders watching the stock get absolutely mauled. This is the same era that gave us Batgirl getting shelved, Coyote versus Acme getting buried, endless belt tightening, asset shuffling, confusion around Max, confusion around HBO, confusion around theatrical strategy, and the general sense that Warner Bros. Discovery has spent the last few years trying to convince people that corporate panic is actually a business model. And now the guy at the top might get paid nearly $1 billion on the way out. So even if you think the merger premium makes sense, even if you think scale is necessary, even if you think Paramount and Warner together can compete better in this market, you still have to answer the smell test. Why does the man cashing out look like the safest person in the room? Now let's get to the part that really turns this from a normal merger story into a full-blown, I'll just call it critical nerd story, and that's the financing. Because this is where the phrase Hollywood merger starts to feel way too small. A huge part of this funding stack reportedly involves roughly $24 billion from sovereign wealth funds tied to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, or some people say Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. And that is where people's ears start ringing. Because now you're not just talking about studio consolidation. Now you're talking about foreign state-linked capital helping power one of the biggest media mergers in modern Hollywood history. And Paramount's side keeps insisting that everything's fine here, nothing to see here, move along. Passive investment, no governance rights, nothing to see here, everybody stay calm. Yeah, right. And I'm sure everybody just woke up one morning and accidentally wandered into a $111 billion takeover. The concern here is not just technical ownership percentages. The concern is influence. Because when you're talking about major US media assets, studios, streaming, cable brands, news properties, people are going to ask whether foreign-backed financing in a deal this big should get more scrutiny, not less. And once that question is on the table, the talking point of, don't worry, it's passive, stops sounding reassuring and starts sounding rehearsed. That is why this deal has picked up so much heat. It's not just big, it's politically radioactive. Now let's talk about the backlash, because this is not just angry YouTube thumbnails and industry chatter anymore. This went public in a much bigger way. Thousands of Hollywood signatories signed an open letter opposing the deal, and that number grew fast. That matters because it tells you this is not some boutique protest by 5 celebrities and 1 publicist with too much time on their hands. This became a visible industry revolt. And then Mark Ruffalo stepped into it. Yeah, Mark Ruffalo. The same guy a lot of people would normally dismiss as just another Hollywood activist. Except here's the funny part. Even if you don't like Mark Ruffalo, he is useful to the story because he is drawing attention to the math. He testified at Senator Cory Booker's April 15th hearing and attacked the merger as another billionaire consolidation play dressed up as necessity. And the reason that lands is simple. Because Hollywood has seen this movie before. We always get the same sales pitch. The merger is about efficiency. This merger is about long-term sustainability. This merger is about strengthening the business. And then what happens? Well, layoffs, fewer buyers, fewer green lights, more franchise dependence, more cost cutting, more creative cowardice, more people fighting over fewer chairs while the people at the top collect bonuses for navigating transformation. That is the pattern. And whether the messenger is Ruffalo, a guild lawyer, a theater owner, or some guy on YouTube with the mic and too many tabs open, the pattern does not change. Receipt, receipt, receipt. This is one of the most important parts of the story because it widens the opposition. It's not just actors, not just writers, not just activist pressure. The theater industry, it's nervous too. And that should tell you something. David Ellison has been out there trying to make the case that this merger is good for theatrical, good for output, good for the future, good for everybody. The promise is essentially, relax, the studios will stay productive, the release slate will stay healthy, theatrical will still matter. And the exhibitors are basically looking at that and saying, brother, we've heard this speech before. Because every time these companies get bigger, the promises get prettier and the slate usually gets tighter. Maybe they say 30 movies a year. Maybe they say theatrical windows matter. Maybe they say they believe in big screen experience. But what happens when the spreadsheets start barking? What happens when the debt service gets ugly? What happens when the merged company starts looking for synergies, efficiencies, and rationalization? That is when theatrical gets squeezed. That is when titles disappear. That is when risk shrinks. That is when the middle gets hollowed out again. So when theater owners say this could be harmful, that's not random whining. That is pattern recognition. Now here's the part a lot of people are going to miss. Even if the merger gets approved by shareholders on Thursday, that does not mean the story's over. It just means the next phase starts. Because after the vote, the deal still has to survive scrutiny. Regulatory scrutiny, political scrutiny, public interest scrutiny, and scrutiny from anyone asking whether more media concentration is actually a good thing in an era where trusted media is already in the basement. There's also UK competition scrutiny hanging over this. And the broader pressure campaign is not going away just because shareholders say yes to $31 a share. So the vote is a major moment, but it's not the ending. It is the next escalation point. Not just will it pass, but what happens to Hollywood if it does? Because those are two different questions. One is about the boardroom. The other is about the industry. So here's the actual thesis. This is not a rescue deal. This is not Hollywood getting saved. This is a power grab being sold as stability. It is a premium for shareholders, a jackpot for David Zaslav, a giant test case for foreign-backed financing and U.S. media consolidation, a warning sign for creators, a red flag for theater owners, and another example of the people who caused the mess positioning themselves as the only ones who can clean it up. That is the real story. Because Hollywood does this every time. The same people break the furniture, sell you more expensive house, and then call it an innovation. And the audience is supposed to nod along like this is all perfectly normal. No. The audience has seen enough of this. So have the writers. So have the exhibitors. So have the shareholders who are apparently fine with the deal, but still looked at Zaslav's golden parachute and said, absolutely not. That is why this story works. Because it's not just about whether the merger happens. It's about how naked the incentives are. Everybody is telling you exactly who they are in the story. The shareholders want the premium. The executives want the payout. The financiers want the leverage. The creatives want fewer knives at their throat. The theaters want fewer broken promises. And the public is supposed to believe this somehow ends with better movies and healthier media. Sure. And I'm sure this time the mega merger will be different. This time the consolidation will be magical. This time the corporate cost cutting will produce artistic freedom. This time the billionaires definitely care about preserving culture. Absolutely. And maybe next week Hollywood will also discover humility. So here's where we are. Monday, April the 20th. Just 3 days out. Warner Bros. Discovery shareholders vote. If they approve the deal, the story gets bigger. If they reject it, the fallout is immediate. Either way, this is one of the biggest Hollywood business stories of the year because it touches everything. Movies, streaming, news, cable, jobs, theatrical, politics, and who gets control more of the media landscape going forward. So drop your prediction in the comments. Does this thing pass on Thursday? And if it does, do you think it actually helps Hollywood, or is just another corporate merger that leaves the industry smaller, meaner, and worse? Do me a favor, if you watched the video this long, hit like, subscribe, share this video out there with your friends and family, and stick around because we are absolutely going to be watching this vote and everything that comes after it. And as always, keep your expectations low and your receipts high. I'm the Critical Nerd, and I'm out.